We just finished recording a great episode with Patrick's agent, investor buddy, friend, local extraordinaire entrepreneur up in Maryland, Joe Bird. Joe Bird is really absolutely killing it. Top 1% real estate agent. He came with the tips for how to find success, what things you need to do to build up your business, and most importantly, just looking at the general market for what every investor and buyer and seller is kind of looking at today. Because it's crazy out there. We all know that. Patrick, what do you think about today's episode with Joe?
I thought today's episode was really great. It's always great to talk to, my good buddy and friend, but also we kind of got into the feels a little bit on the right, quote unquote, and wrong ways to run your own business and what success really means to you. So it's super important, so I think you guys should definitely listen all the way to the end. We go deep diving into a ton of stuff, but it's also going to make you reflect on what you got going on in your life and how you're running your business. So with that, here it is. How's it going, everybody? And welcome back to the Real FI podcast. I'm your host, Patrick McGrath, with my co-host, James Rippion. How's it going today, James?
Going well today, Patrick, and we're going to jump right into it. So, Joseph, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for coming on. Why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, appreciate it. You can call me Joe, by the way. So I'm a real estate agent. I've been here licensed in Maryland since 2011. Actually know Patrick from as a client and now really good friend. And so most of my business has been focused on residential resale. Certainly dabble in new construction and investments and things like that. Help a few people flip some houses and certainly help some people acquire some rental properties. But the majority of my business has been focused on just sort of the residential resale side. But I myself also believe in rental properties and the power of real estate as a financial tool. So I own some rental properties that have done really well for me.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, let's kind of get into your background a little bit. Like, I'm sure you just didn't start jumping right into becoming an agent and then buying real estate. There has to be, a little story that got you there. So let's kind of rewind a little bit and talk about kind of how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. So before real estate, I was a musician and I owned a marketing record label, music label kind of company, and did that for about 7 years. Had a lot of fun, learned a whole lot about what not to do, which is just as important as knowing what to do. And as I decided to transition and have a family, I decided that the music industry wasn't, stable enough. It was, feast or famine. So I decided I need to do something a bit more stable. Made the very logical decision to go into real estate to, find stability in life because, real estate's never up and down. And the reason I chose real estate is my family had been involved in real estate. So my grandparents had owned rental properties since 1942. They bought their first property in Forest Park. It was just a regular traditional house. They converted it to a duplex, finished the upstairs off into an apartment. Their mortgage was $35 a month, and they rented the apartment for $35 a month. So like original house hacking, right? And then they just kept kind of going down the Liberty Road corridor and doing the same thing, converting singles into multis, converting twos into threes, twos into fours, and so on and so forth. And so when I graduated college and was running the music company and looking at where I needed to be and moving back home, but again, I was running a music company, didn't make a whole lot of money. It was really a passion thing. I moved into one of the 4 units. So they had their house that they lived in that they had chopped into a 4 unit as they needed less space. And then they had a 4 unit in front and just up the hill from the property. So I moved into one of the units and became the property manager, as they were elderly and they couldn't really deal with meeting with plumbers and electricians and so forth. I took over the property management, lived really cheap, and so kind of caught the real estate bug with that. Looked at the way their lifestyle was. They were entrepreneurs, they did other endeavors, but real estate really was the background of all the wealth that they had built. And Patrick knows my house is pretty neat. It's a pain in the butt, but it's pretty neat. And just looking at that and what that had gotten them, obviously I was attracted to that. So when I decided to make that change, I said, well, I'm already kind of doing property management. I think I should look at real estate as a potential career move. And it's been one of the best decisions I've ever made.
Wow, awkward silence there. Patrick, I thought you were going to be taking it over there. We keep these edits in, so no worry about it. So Joe, tell us, man, how big was your grandparents' portfolio for scale? I'm just kind of curious what you were perhaps, aspiring towards when you were looking at all the success that they had built.
Well, so at the time, at that time, it was 8 units. So the one that they lived in, plus three additional in their house, plus the four. But they had transferred other properties. So there was a 2 unit next door that I now own. I bought that back that they had owned at one point. There's actually a nursing home right next door that they originally founded. They put up the land, they own the land. And actually, the founder of Jiffy Lube was the partner in building that out into a nursing home. And unfortunately, that did go bankrupt and they lost the land in the deal. But thankfully, that was all they lost in it. But they, they would buy or they would convert, they'd hold them for a while, they'd sell them depending on where they were at. Again, they were entrepreneurs. So my grandmother was an interior decorator, custom window treatment. He was a chemist and they became like the install person. He also sold insurance. So I think their life was pretty up and down from an income source. It wasn't just straight up. And so I think they would sell when they needed money or they saw other opportunities to buy stuff. So at the end, towards the end, I don't know if it was like their number one income source for the most part, but when I was living here, they were retired. It was their only income source. And I saw the stability that it gave them later in life. And so from my standpoint, I think somewhere, let's see, right now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 doors. I think somewhere around 15 to 20 doors would be kind of a good number. I'm a big believer in diversification of your investments and your income and things like that.
Perfect. So,
Yeah.
when you got interested and started to get involved into the residential sales in 2011-ish, what was it like for you jumping into this new industry at that period of time? Like, rewind the clock a little bit and just tell us like what you were experiencing starting that new business at that time.
Yeah, well, it was the exact opposite market that it is today. So back then there was a ton of inventory on the market. It was completely opposite today where there's nothing on the market. I mean, I remember my first client, I think I showed 100 plus houses to before they bought one. You were going out on a Saturday, taking them out on appointments, and you were booking 15, 20 houses per appointment to look at. Now you're lucky if you can get 2 in the same appointment window. So I was predominantly buyer's agent back then, but I had all the drive and the passion in the world to be successful. And so I did whatever it took, work 7 days a week, 80 plus hours a week, I wasn't going to fail. I had just failed in another business. I wasn't going to fail again. And I was going to do whatever it took to get it to happen. And worked out great. I built up an awesome book of business, an awesome, relationship pool with clients and past clients. And that feeds me today. In fact, I just recently cut off all cold leads from my personal business. My team still gets all those leads that we generate from various things, but I only actually work the past clients, referrals, sphere of influence, things like that. But it was fun. I had a blast. I loved looking at houses. I love construction. I love that aspect of real estate. So I had a blast just touring houses all day with everybody. And it just turned out that it's actually pretty lucrative if you work hard and are pretty good at it. So it was awesome.
What would be your number one piece of advice to somebody looking to potentially get into real estate? And I know, when you entered, it was a totally different market, like night and day. I think we could all acknowledge that. But, if you had to pull some sort of general theme of, advice, what would you tell somebody who's looking to just start off as an agent?
You can't halfway do it. You have to do it 110%. Like 100% is not good enough. You got to devote yourself, immerse yourself into it 100%. If you just try to dabble in it, you're going to fail. You're going to be, the 3 out of 5 agents that don't renew their license at year 2. Nationally, I don't know the exact stat, but it's somewhere along those lines. Like you're going to be in that if you don't actually put 110% effort. And it's hard. It's a hard jump because there's no base pay. There's no guaranteed pay. It's 100% commission, and it probably takes 3 to 6 months before you get your first commission check. But if you stay consistent, if you go 110% into it and you stay consistent on it, they just start rolling in.
So let me ask your opinion on this. And I'm sorry for monopolizing here, Patrick. You've been in the business for a long time. Do you think it's too easy to become a real estate agent?
1,000%.
Because I know like a lot of people who start to get into the industry, they get in, they have all these, lavish ideals of, oh, I'm going to be, racking up these commission checks. But the fact is like 90% of agents, barely make $25,000, $30,000 in the commissions. So yeah, I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that. Do you think it's a little too easy to get a real estate license?
It is. It's way too easy. It's 60 hours of coursework and a test. And the test isn't easy, but it's certainly passable. But the 60 hours of coursework, I mean, you need more to become a barber, right? Like, oh, you messed up your haircut. Okay, most of us, maybe Patrick and I, not so much, but most of us, that grows back in a couple of weeks, right? but you mess up somebody's home purchase, that could ruin their financial life. Like 60 hours versus, I don't even know, it's like 120 for a barber. So yeah, it's way too easy. And the other problem is, one of many problems, I should say, but another big problem is the coursework and the test teach you nothing about how to be a real estate agent. None of it has anything to do with how to succeed in the business of real estate. It is simply the rules and regs and laws. So that's what the broker's role is. That's why you have to affiliate with a broker, and the broker's then responsible for training you and teaching you. But unfortunately, there's a lot, the way the brokerage model is working today is it's a numbers game. They care about the number of people that they have signed up through them, not necessarily the quality of the person signed up or the amount of business that they do. And so that just drives this. It's way too easy, and people don't know what they're doing. My biggest frustration in the industry is dealing with agents that don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, and that's the unfortunate part is, like you said, there's the desk fee or your brokerage fee, and more bodies going after the leads is going to drive more revenue for the specific brokerage, and it's a sales job. People think that, oh well, I'm struggling at this, or I'm not too good at that. Let me go sell real estate. I know a bunch of people that are buying houses, or I have a bunch of friends, like when things come up, they'll use me because I've got my license, and people don't really understand, I think, that it is a 1000% grinding sales job. Like I used to do door-to-door sales. Okay. And like, that is freaking tough. And I think a real estate agent and becoming a real estate agent has got to be just as tough, because it's literally building off of nothing besides your relationships that you already have built. So it's got to be even tougher right now. Like anyone, I think, who's considering going into the field right now, like you have got to really be passionate and know that you're probably not going to have success for at least 24 months. Like if you're not going into it like that, then I think that you are setting yourself up for failure. And I'd love, James, for you to piggyback off that. Am I speaking out of tune here, or what's going
No,
on?
dude, there's more real estate agents than active listings in this country, man. Like if you had to put all the real estate agents in a room and fight over the houses to list, like some of them aren't eating. That's as Joe was saying, that's just kind of the nature of the business right now. Transaction volume is absolutely freaking terrible. So if you're looking at it for as an immediate jump into new industry because you're having not as much success wherever you are now, you're jumping into something that's economically difficult from the get. So people can find success, but like Joe said, you got to hustle and grind and stick with it for a long time. And a lot of that return comes on the back end years down the road, after the people you sold to as a buyer's agent because you could get nothing else. Now they're moving, now they're upgrading, now they're downgrading, they're doing whatever in their life circumstance, and you've stayed in touch. And like you said, 24, it's normally a 24-month turnaround to really get that repeat business. So if you're going to look to do it, make sure you have a cash surplus to fall back on. That's my suggestion.
Or don't, and let that be your driving force to work your face off. And people asked me in the beginning, and back in 2011, people told me I was crazy for getting into real estate. I had real estate agents that I interviewed with that I would like pick their brain and maybe join their team or just get their opinion, and they were like, "You're stupid for doing this right now. This is dumb. Don't do this." And I'm like, that doesn't make sense to me. Like, granted, I'm used to making $5 grand, $7 grand, $10 grand a year running my music business, right? So I'm used to not making money. That doesn't scare me. That's my life. But it's like, but I saw an opportunity of a burned out, jaded industry where there's a fresh life had opportunity. And I came in and I just worked my face off. People asked how I was so successful, and that was my answer. I worked my face off. So I think that the same can be said now. There's a lot of burnout in the industry. There's a lot of jaded. There's a lot of tired. We're all exhausted from what came during COVID to what we're dealing with now. And I think somebody with the right mindset that has the skills. I mean, that's the thing, right? You get the mindset and the skills. The two have to be there, and the ability to adapt and learn and take guidance and advice. But I do think there's opportunity in this market. It's going to be hard for a while, but if you're the one that perseveres, once everybody kind of gets tired and gets out, the opportunity is going to be there for you. The market's going to be there.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Well, I kind of think that that's also right now what a lot of investors are feeling on the investor side looking for properties to buy. You know, not only on the agent side, if you're that way, but also on the investor side, you know, it's the inventory is low, the interest rates are high. It is going to be harder to find and secure a good deal. So for the listeners out there that are currently looking for their next investment property, are currently looking to take down something in the next 6 months, like as an extremely successful like top 1% agent, like what advice do you have to those people to kind of nudge them up to the top of the list to be able to secure something that might be on the market?
Well, so at the end of the day, if the numbers work today, they're going to work in the future. So right now should be pretty close to the worst time in the numbers, right? Interest rates comparatively. So if they work today, even if it's not the margin you wanted, whatever, but if they work today, it's a good time to buy. Rates should be coming down. There's no guarantee. We don't know if we're at the top. We have no idea. Tell you, I'm buying an investment property right now. The likelihood is I always buy at the top. So the rates are probably going to come down shortly after I close on this property. That's what seems to happen every time I buy. But if they come down, you can refinance down the road. So, but think about it this way. Certainly rates going higher and all that has driven demand down without a doubt. There's less buyers out there, but it drove inventory down even further. If you refinance during COVID and you were kind of stupid not to, and you've got a 3% rate, and you know, right now they're what, 7.5, and you're looking at downsizing. Baby boomers were the big, like we were right before COVID, we were starting to see them finally get rid of their properties because they bought in 06, 08. And they were finally able to get out from underneath of it, and they're not in a need to move. They're in a be nice to move. Well, they just refinance. Why? How does it make sense for them to downsize house and upsize mortgage when they don't need to move? It doesn't make any sense. So we actually froze more inventory with these rates going up. So we, even though yes, we have less buyers, we have far less sellers. Well, what's going to happen if rates plummet? If rates tomorrow, if Jerome Powell finally gets his head out of his you know what and does the right thing, and all of a sudden rates drop to 5% tomorrow. Buyers motivate very quickly. They're going to be in the market within 24 hours making offers. Sellers motivate over 3 to 6 months typically. So they're going to be much slower to the uptick there. You're going to see insane demand and inventory not change. You think it's hard to get a house now? You have no idea how hard it's going to be to get a house when that happens. And maybe it balances out over time, but there's going to be 6 months there, a good 6 months, I think, where it is completely imbalanced and it's impossible to get a house.
And I've got a lot of clients myself on my property management side of things that have these, huge single family houses that, in years past would have made no sense to operate as a rental, but they refuse to let it go simply because of the fact that they have the mortgage locked in for another 27 years at that interest rate. And, they're like, I can never replace this house at this price point, at this monthly cost, and it makes no sense to sell it. So, they're almost at the point where like they could keep it vacant and they'd rather do that than sell it. So it's, it is a very crazy situation to say the least. I did not foresee this happening. I didn't see rates going up and then, inventory dropping off the face of the earth. I thought we would have saw the opposite. Rates go up, prices come down. Nope, don't think so. Very interesting turn of events for sure.
Oh, for sure. I mean, to your point, like I sat down with a past client and they want to downsize. They have a couple of years worth of work left and they just want to get prepared to downsize and downsize mortgage, et cetera, et cetera. And I sat down with them, and in their particular situation, they have a really nice, larger single family, detached in a very hot area. And it's 20 years old. It's got original roof, original HVAC, original carpet, original paint. It needs some, if you're going to bring it on the market and try to get money top dollar out of it, you should probably spruce it up. And I said, well, you know what you should really consider doing? You should really consider keeping it as a rental for at least 2 years. Go buy your next house, pull line of credit off here, access some of your equity, go buy your next house, rent this for a couple of years. I think where you're at, the prices are going to continue to go up over the next couple of years. Don't do your carpet, paint, roof, HVAC yet. Do those when the tenants move out. And who cares what they do to the property the next 2 years? Because you're going to redo that anyway. And then now you just got the equity over 2 years. You just got the rent over 2 years. You did the same work you were going to do, and you still avoided capital gains. Most likely, I'm not an accountant. I can't give you that formal advice. But most likely, you still occupied the property 2 of the last 5 years as the primary residence. You have no capital gains on that income you just made. And we ran some scenarios, and it was like an extra $150,000 that they were going to put in their pocket based on their estimations over those 2 years by doing it that way.
Hmm.
Why wouldn't you do that?
And this is just a further testament of why you got to work with the right agent that is not scrapping by for the first deal, because you're not going to hear that advice from them. They're going to try to make you sell your house and do perhaps what's not best for you in the long run. So, Joe, I appreciate that, man. I mean, that's what you got to do for your clients. And, that's what's going to make you a top performing agent, because they're going to remember that and spread the word on that. So 100%,
Exactly.
couldn't agree more.
Success always follows the right thing. It's tortoise and hare, right? So the hare, the one that just goes there after every deal and cheats everybody, yeah, they'll hit success, but it's not going to sustain. They're going to fall apart. The tortoise will always win that race because they're doing the right thing at every step.
And I think that analogy is extremely important right now for all of our listeners out there, is to remember that if you're doing the work, if you're looking every day, if you're running the numbers on every property that comes on, if you have your ducks in a row, if you've got your credit on point, if you've got your money set aside, if you're ready when that opportunity strikes, you are set. And with that, I kind of wanted to ask, even though the inventory is low, I am starting to see price cuts happening on properties. I am starting to see days on market starting to tick up, and we are starting to see some properties lingering over like 60 to 90 days on the market. Okay. So as an agent in a hot market, are there opportunities with those properties to come in and maybe not lowball offer, but maybe be able to scrape by a little bit better deal by focusing on some of those things? If you have all your ducks in a row, not go in there and, have a shitty credit score and barely get financing and try to go after some of these things. But if you've got your ducks in a row, do you think that maybe that's where the opportunity lies in the current market that we're in?
Oh, for sure. And I'm going to take a quick second and plug one of my podcasts. I have 2 podcasts out there, but one of them is called Bird Seeds, and it's my little nuggets of wisdom, aha moments, seeds of thought. And one of the first episodes I have there is why do the star players always get the lucky bounce? So take that. Hockey's my main sport. Take that to hockey. It's like the star players, the puck always just happens to land on their stick when the goalie's on that side, and they drop it in. Why is that? Well, it's because they were prepared and they're skilled. They do the practice every day. They know exactly where to be. They can read them. They can read what's happening on the game. They know how the puck bounces. They know exactly where to be because they prepared, and they're skilled enough to make it happen, to think quick and to make it happen. Those are the 2 reasons that they always get the lucky bounce. The non-skilled player, the non-disciplined player, the puck went to the same place. They're just not sitting there because they're not reading where it's going to go. So that's the same thing that's going in with what you're talking about, right? Like, you need to be prepared. You want to do this? Be ready to jump quick. So yes, we are seeing days on market start to tick up, some price reductions. I will say it is August, and almost every August we see this. So what happens is you get the spring rush that happens in the market. The sellers that are entering the market at the end of the spring, summer market are usually more of the opportunistic sellers, not the real sellers. So an opportunistic seller sees where the market's going and says, I should probably cash out, let me go. But they're greedy sellers. They're looking for the top dollar. That's the only reason they're selling. They're not trying to move. They're just trying to do it. And they push the price too far. And it is still possible to overprice a house. It's very hard to underprice a house in this market. It's very possible to overprice it. So they shoot too high. But then what also happens at the end of summer is the buyer demand drops, because it's the end of summer. You're getting ready to go back to school if you have kids. You're going on your last vacations. You're enjoying, this 100-degree September week we have here. Nuts. But those, like, the demand kind of drops out then. So you wind up in this gap in the market where you have overpriced and less demand. And those sellers go, but I've convinced myself I should probably move. So they start to get more realistic and they start reducing the price. So yes, I think there's opportunity in the market to be able to go. Again, you're not going to have much success lowballing in this market. Every once in a while, you might get lucky, but to go in and really try to negotiate, really try to find your leverage. What is it that seller wants besides money, right? Do they want $1 million? Sure, we all want $1 million. What is it? Do they need time to find their next house? Well, if you're an investor, you could probably give them that time, no problem. Do they need a quick sale? Do they need to move really quick so that they can get their money out to go do the next thing? They're already under contract on their house. They don't want to lose. Well, so you got to really try to find where that leverage is besides price, and then price is the reward for finding that leverage.
That makes a ton of sense. That makes a ton of sense. And I hope the listeners out there are paying attention, because I think I think those key things are only going to become more important as inventory continues to drop, as potentially rates stay the same for an extended period of time. So, and we're going into an election year. So there's just a whole lot going on right now. People don't like uncertainty. And right now they're certain that they have a good rate and they're happy where they're at, for those kinds of things. And rents are at the highest level that they've been in years. I mean, even HUD just came out and released their HUD data for HUD. So all the HUD numbers are going up. So people have a lot of reasons not to sell. So when you do see something on the market, you got to be able to jump at it. So with that, let's kind of get into this rental portfolio that you have now that we've kind of touched base on everything that's kind of going on, and, talk about some of the things that you've acquired over the last couple of years, what they kind of bring, and what your overall strategy with that is.
Yeah, so my strategy with real estate has been more of a retirement strategy, more of a passive strategy. So put the least amount of capital that I can into acquisition, and I don't take cash flow out of them. I let the cash flow stay in the property, building an account to handle repairs, maintenance, things like that. So I just kind of leave it in there. And my goal is, when I go look at retirement, they're paid off, and they're just, it's kind of, it's just a revenue source at that point, right? It's kind of like an annuity, if you will. Like, you put a little bit in, and then it pays you out from there. And I could opt to sell it if I want at that point. I could opt to convert the property at that point. But realistically, I self-manage all my stuff now. At retirement, I hire a manager and I get them to do it. But with today's dollars, not including my vacation rental, in today's dollars, I'm probably around $6,500, $7,000 a month in income at that point, with very little, with no debt at that point. So, that's a reasonable addition to my retirement. I invest traditionally in the market and things like that, but this isn't a supplementation that I can do to that.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting strategy, because, most of the people that we have on the show, they're all looking to retire early, right? They're looking to build up a portfolio, or have already built up a portfolio and have semi-retired from the market. And I like your perspective on, look, like, I can be an active, not quote unquote employee, but an active participant in the workforce, have this, like you said, annuity. So you're also investing in the stock market, 401k, all this other stuff, and also just acquire a property. Every time I run by a good deal, I'm not going to take any money out of it. I'm doing really well personally. Let me just continue to have this. And then down the road, when the time comes, I'll be sitting pretty, because now I have multiple buckets to pull from, and I'm not just relying on one thing.
Right. And if the market were to crash and prices go down, I've still got traditional investments. If traditional stock market goes haywire, then I've still got the real estate. And these things always, historically will come back. They're all cyclical. They'll all come back. But I don't want to be looking at the year or 2 years before I retire, and now I'm totally freaked out because the stock market went haywire, and that was where all my money was. And now I can't retire. Now I put all this money in there and I can't do anything with it. I don't ever want to be in that situation. So I've got buckets, and I don't need it all, right? I can pull from here until this comes back, and then pull it from here if I need to. So I think having those options is key. Now, I will say I own one vacation rental, and it has done incredibly well, knock on wood. There's a hurricane out in the Atlantic that looks pretty brutal, so hopefully it stays north. And Patrick, you've been there. It's awesome. But I bought it. I was going on vacation to the same place twice a year with my family, my wife and I and our kids, and we were spending probably 10 grand a year on renting houses down in this particular area. It's our favorite place. I want to retire to it. There's a lot of reasons for it. So we decided to buy instead of rent. So we bought a little 3-bed, 2-bath, little beach box, oceanfront, and we got a great deal on it. Long story long, you couldn't see the ocean because it's got a giant dune in front of it. So I got money back from the seller, and I used that money to put on a rooftop deck. So now I have an ocean view from the rooftop deck, increased the value substantially with that, but it was sitting on the market for a long time because of that. Why take the risk of oceanfront when you can't see the ocean? Well, it's actually a good thing. The dune protects the house from wind and a whole lot of stuff. Um, so we vacation there a couple times a year. We do so my family do typically 2 trips a year there. I'll do at least 1 or 2 fishing trips a year. That's how Patrick's been down there with me. We usually go over the winter sometime and do some maintenance and kind of hang out. It's been awesome for our family. So we paid basically $390 for it, and I just got an appraisal back. I pulled a line of credit off of it at $725, and we're cash flowing about 10 grand a year positive in addition to that, which is just awesome. So we keep the cash flow in the property for maintenance. I pulled the line out just because it is Hurricane Alley, so that if something bad does happen, yes, I'm insured, but there's lots of deductibles and sure stuff that's not covered, so that I have access to that if I need
I
it.
think that's amazing because what basically you were paying 10 grand a month and now you're making 10 grand or 10 grand a year. Now you're making 10 grand a year. So you got a 20K swing there,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because you lose that expense and you've gained 340 grand worth of equity over the last like 5 years that you've owned it.
Not even 5 years, for 2019, so less than 4 years.
Now, most people would say that that is a passion investment. You know, that's a terrible idea. You're going to lose money. And you went into that, right? Like prepared to lose, a couple grand every year just for the aspect of having it.
When I bought it, the numbers were I was going to lose 10 grand a year, but I was already losing 10 grand a year by paying to be there. So it was really in my book. Yes, the property investment was a wash. It was negative 10, but it's a wash in my actual cash flow. And I was okay with that because of long-term value, the emotional thing I can get from going to the same place, having my stuff down there, not having to load the car up every time. So I think that that's a really good point. Is you can say there's an emotional purchase and a business purchase. They don't necessarily have to be different. They can be the same. Most of my rental properties, there's only one that's really not an emotional, and it kind of was. It was my old business for my music business. We bought it and renovated it and own it. But everything has some kind of attachment to me, and there's some kind of control that I get from it. So my 4 units right in front of my house, my 2 units right next to my house. There's a 4 unit I'm looking at right down the street. So there's a lot, like they all touch my property. They're easy to manage. Literally, this door that's behind me in my home office here, right next to that's a mailbox. And my tenants put their rent checks in that mailbox. Like I don't have to go collect it. I don't have to deal with anything. They literally drop a check in that mailbox right there. And I drive by them every day. They see me every day. I see them every day. They're going to text me. And, I'm a reasonable person. They have a reason that they're going to be running late on rent. I'm not a jerk. But they're not just going to ignore me because they see me every day. They see me drive by. So they're going to text me and be like, hey, I'll get it to you in a week.
Well,
So yeah.
I was going to say, you've done a good job at remembering the purpose behind all of this isn't to rack up and stack dollars. It's to make the most of your time. So
Yeah.
especially when it comes back to your, vacation rental, you've optimized an investment to provide time for you and your family to enjoy something like time together. And it's not always about the ROI. It's about living. I mean, people I think get a little too overconsumed in the number of units they're going to have and the amount of cash flow, and they kind of forget living in the moment a little bit. So that's just a good example of that. And especially with you having your rent checks delivered to you, so you can just turn around and grab them out of the mailbox. I mean, that's awesome. You've organized your business in a manner such that you can optimize time. So I think that's amazing.
Yeah, appreciate it. It's really been fun and rewarding to be able to do it in this capacity, and to be able to do it in a way that, like, yes, there's a financial reward to it. That's awesome. That's the reason we do this. But there's also the emotional side of it and the lifestyle side of it, and helping the family and doing all that. So it's funny. The rental property at the beach. Actually, I was in a really bad car accident and I got a settlement. And I told my wife when we got the settlement check, I said, what are we going to do with this? Put it in the market? That's stupid. We sit on it? That's stupid. Let's put this to something that we can get not only the financial benefit from, but we can replace some of the emotional turmoil we had during this recovery. And it's been awesome. Been absolutely wonderful.
And I kind of want to go down this road a little bit further, is that living in the moment, the whole reason that we're doing all of this, like, Joe, your story, you're almost doing like everything that every guru online tells you not to do. Like, don't tell your tenants you're the owner. Don't buy a rental property in your front house. Don't get checks delivered to you. Do everything online. Like, don't buy a vacation home because, you know, you think it's going to be an investment and it ends up losing you money and all of that, all those things, right? People tell you not to do, but yet here you are being successful, and success is defined to you personally. Don't let other people project their ideas of success onto you. Like, and one of the reasons I love doing this podcast is because it helps ground me sometimes, because I know me personally, sometimes I have gotten, you know, big on the unit count and how much cash flow we're bringing in and optimizing your ROI and your return on equity and everything else out of your properties for the refinance and, you know, all of that. And all that stuff is great and you should be thinking about all that, but that's not the number one reason all the time that we're doing this. It is a lifestyle. It is, you know, and it is to you what you listening ultimately feel that success is. And I think sometimes that message doesn't get out there enough, or enough people aren't preaching it. And I just want to let you know that I appreciate your investment strategy and right now kind of what we're talking about, because it helps ground me on a weekly basis, you know, when we're talking to different people like yourself.
Patrick, I mean, based on that though, how would you feel about sharing that story you told me right before we jumped on with your tenant? Because that kind of goes in line with this a little bit. I mean, it's sort of related.
Yeah, I mean, so in that aspect, you guys got to remember that, like, as a landlord, as an investor, you know, we have people that spend their lives in our properties, right? That's their homes, that's their lives. So I have a tenant from a property that we bought, our 10-unit apartment building, that's lived there for like 35 years. This guy has lived in this building for 35 years. He lives in a second story studio apartment. And when we bought the property, he was paying $500 a month. In the current condition of this thing, it could easily rent for $1,100, no problem. But the guy has a ton of health issues going on right now. And, you know, last week he called me up and was like, hey, I'm getting rushed to the hospital. You know, I have some issues, yada, yada, yada. And, you know, Danielle and I started talking, and I have a girl who lives in an ADA compliant apartment on the bottom floor that she's moving out into one of our new units. And we were talking and we're like, hey, you know what? We should offer this up to him. Like, this guy he needs a motorized chair that he bought that I helped him put together, but his apartment wasn't big enough for him to even utilize it, you know? And it was kind of one of those things. And it's like, okay, well, when this girl moves out, I could increase the rent from $1,450 to $1,550, you know? When he moves out, you know, he's paying $700. He's already a couple hundred a month under, you know, but this is the guy's home. He's lived here forever. So what are we doing? We decided that we are going to offer him this other apartment that's on the bottom floor, that's ADA compliant, that's going to make his life so much better. And we're going to give it to him for the same price that he's paying in his studio apartment, just because we have the ability to do that. And why not? You know what I mean? Why not do it? Okay. I renovate his apartment. All said and done, I'm probably going to be out maybe $250 cash flow after I renovate and spend a little bit of money on renovating that apartment. Give somebody who spent their whole life at this place, you know, a better rest of their life. So it's not always about the money. And you know what? Like, you have to remember that as an investor and as someone who is sometimes looked at really poorly in the media, like, you know, we do have the ability to help people out. Just like you said, you know, if someone's going to be late on the rent, just keep the lines of communication open. It's one of those things where it's like, sometimes things are the right things to do if you can do them, even if they're not the right business decisions to do, you know?
So, Patrick, what did that guy do when you told him and you made that offer to him?
I mean, he asked if the rent was going up, and I said, no, we're gonna, you know, give it to you the same. I mean, he basically broke down and almost started crying on the phone, like he couldn't believe that we were offering to do this. And I told him, and he can barely walk up the stairs. So we're like, we're gonna hire movers, we're gonna help you get in there, like we're gonna take care of it for you, you know? And you could just hear in his voice, he was so shocked that somebody was going to help him out like that. I mean, he loves with the birds and everything, but he can't even get around to go walk around outside. And it's like, hey, look, you now have the ability to do that, and we're gonna do that and help you out. So like, you have the power to, change people's lives, affect people's lives by being a good person, and sometimes doing things that don't make financial sense, but make emotional sense. And that's, I think, kind of the message that we're getting around this whole thing is sometimes things just need to make sense to you and your business, and they don't necessarily need to make business sense all of the time.
That's awesome. That's a great story and exactly the right way to handle it. And, every penny doesn't matter. Like, in investing, you always think about every single penny, and that just, the pennies don't matter. Think about the whole picture. Think about, yeah, you got to be in business, you got to be profitable. You're not in business if you're not. But the total, like, who you interact with, how you interact with people, how they interact back with you, that's lifestyle. That creates a life. And when you're good to people, they're good to you. And when you put good out in the world, you get good back. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it's 100% the way that, we choose to be. And I have always done things like that for a really long time. I think this is the first time I've ever shared anything like that. But it's just the right thing to do, and those things come back to you, 1,000%. And that's not how I typically look at things all the time like that, but they do when you're doing the right things. Those things come back to you wholeheartedly. And when you build your business on making good decisions and treating people fairly, treating people right, treating your tenants right, treating your tenants fairly, I think sometimes we forget as a landlord, like, there is a position of power that you're in, and you need to put yourself in other people's shoes and see it from their light too, and not just in the dollars and cents aspect like you're talking about, and really think about the type of business owner that you want to be, the type of landlord that you want to be, and the type of person that you want to be to these people. And I think I choose every day to try to be the best version of myself to them. And it sometimes it's slower building your business, doing things that way, and sometimes you feel like you could be doing more if you did some of these other things. But it's like, at the end of the day, you really just need to make sure that you're doing the right things for you, and it will come back to pay off. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned I do things the wrong way, right? The way they tell you not to do it. Another thing I do it is all my tenants are month to month from day one. So month to month, day one, 60-day notice to terminate. So basically, worst case, somebody's in there 3 months if they never pay after the first month, right? So my philosophy on that is, because the properties are so close, I don't want miserable people around me. Like, if they're not happy there, move. So I want them to be free to move if they're not happy, and I want to be free to move people if I'm not happy. And what I've found with that is they stay forever, because when you give somebody a year, and the renewal's coming up, especially if you're doing annual increases, they look at their options every year. But if they're month to month, they don't look at their options. Like, they just go, okay, and they just stay, and they stay. I mean, most of my tenants have been here. My 1 bedrooms have turned over more often. I mean, that to me makes total sense that they would. But my 2 bedrooms almost never turn over. I mean, I've got 7 years. I've got 5 years. The one guy's only been there about a year. The other guy was here well before I bought it, left for 2 years, came back. So I mean, it's just like they've been here for a long, long time, and they're happy. And I don't do annual increases. I'll do them maybe every 3 years, too, depending. I mean, if we have oil and shared oil bill. So if my oil bill skyrockets, then yeah, I'm going to go and do an increase on that. But for the most part, I'm not increasing rent on them. I increase the turnover, which is few and far between. So yes, I'm leaving money on the table, but there's a hassle factor, right? Especially because this is a passive for me. Like, turning over is annoying. I have to show the apartment to a bunch of people. I don't really want to deal with that. And you got to go and redo it. And you got to do stuff. So like, the hassle factor to me is worth it, every penny. And they're happy. But I remember a story with a guy who was first tenant in the unit. We had a bunch of leaks, and he got really upset with me about these leaks. And I said, dude, do you really think that I'm happy about having these leaks, that I've got to pay plumbers to come in and fix and replace floor on a brand new investment? I'm probably more upset than you are. But based on this attitude, should I take this as your notice to leave? notice to vacate? He's like, well, no. And I was like, well, then I'm doing everything. I'm in here within like an hour of you telling me about it. And we've got professionals in here within 12 hours. You tell me about it. Let's work together and not be so pissed off at each other. And he's like, all right, okay. And it turned out to be fun.
I love that, Joe. I think that's fantastic. Looking at where you're at today and your various business lines, between, being an agent and an investor and managing your own properties, what are some of the goals that you have set out in front of you for what you're trying to attain? Do you have, and we were just kind of talking about this, like it's not always a dollar count and a unit
Right.
count, but, how are you kind of measuring your progression as an entrepreneur and investor?
Yeah. So from the investment side of it, I'm more of an opportunistic investor. Opportunity, not opportunistic. That's a negative thing. Opportunity investor. When the opportunities present themselves, see what I can do with it. So there's a property kind of right down the end of the street that we're looking at right now. That would be a good opportunity. I would love to buy more vacation rentals so that I have multiple places to vacation all the time. So exploring more things and maybe, a mountain area. We have the beach already covered, so maybe a mountain, maybe different things like that, lake, so on and so forth. So that would be kind of where I'd want to go there. As far as like entrepreneurship and business, I've got a couple really awesome irons in the fire that I can't kind of talk about quite yet, but I love to be back when I have them launched and I can talk about them. But I'm really kind of reinvigorating an entrepreneurial spirit right now of really trying to solve problems and do things a better way. I think especially in real estate, because there's so much money in it, we get stagnant on the way it's been done, the way it's been, sort of transformed to the way it's done over time. And as an industry, it just kind of gets stuck that way because that's just the way it's been. And there's enough money that everybody's happy. But if you really break it down, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't make any sense in the way it's done. So forgetting what we know and really starting from the ground up on how can we make this better, and being able to make that a better industry for everybody, and then also being able to make that profitable. So really kind of just fueling that entrepreneurial fire that I had for a long time that frankly I let die because real estate, there's enough money in it that you kind of lose your motivation to do it a different way.
Yeah, it's
Makes a lot
definitely a
of
business where you can kind of get stuck in the groove of, what's been done. Especially, when it comes to something as simple as commissions, everyone always thinks it's 6% because that's what it has been and that's what it will be. But you can always negotiate interesting terms with buyers and sellers to, do something other than what's been done in the past. So I agree
Exactly.
with you there, man. There's a lot of opportunity on the table for someone who's ready to disrupt. It's a very traditional industry, and you just don't see a lot of improvement other than Realtor.com and Zillow. So
And the problem is disruption is typically a negative thing. It's typically cheapening the industry. The consumer gets a worse product, so on and so forth. So how can you do that in a positive way? How can you positively disrupt? And that's kind of what I've been working on. And I think there's a lot of change coming to real estate over the next couple of years. These 3 DOJ lawsuits that are out there, the class actions, decoupling of commissions, anywhere.re just settled their side of it yesterday or this morning or today, whatever that was. You're starting to see the settlements come out of it. Bright MLS already removed the requirement to offer co-op compensation in the MLS. So you're starting to see this kind of really start to take hold. I never thought it was going to be a thing. I thought it was really had no foot. It apparently has feet because there wouldn't have to be 3 class action suits going on at the same time and settlements happening.
give us a little bit of background, man. I'm sure a lot of people
Yeah.
who just interface with the industry without being an agent maybe don't know what's kind of going on. And of course, we don't expect specifics, but just
Sure.
generally speaking, what were some of the problems and what's being fought over?
Yeah, so the class action lawsuits, they're basically collusion, antitrust lawsuits. And what they're saying is that the act and the requirement to list your property in MLS, that the seller has to offer compensation to the buyer broker. So when you list a house for sale, you hire an agent. This is the traditional way it's been done. You hire an agent, you agree to a total percentage of commission. That agent will, in the agreement, you'll both agree to offer a percentage to the buyer broker that brings the buyer, and the rest is retained by the listing broker. And what they're saying is that act, that's the standard across the industry between all brokers that are putting properties in the MLS, is collusion and antitrust. Basically saying that's working against the seller's best interest. Well, the reason this all came about was because there wasn't such a thing as buyer brokerage for a long time. There was listing, seller's agent and sub agent. So sub agent was the agent that wasn't on the contract with the seller that brought the buyer, but they represented the seller. So everybody was working for the seller and representing the seller. So it made sense that they were paying that commission. Well, when buyer brokerage came about in the 90s and 2000s, it was just kind of already customary that the seller paid. So it just kind of shifted that way. And if you think about it, the seller's in a windfall, the seller's getting money, the buyer's spending money. It's harder for the buyer to come up with extra cash where this is just coming out of what the seller's getting. So it just kind of shifted to be this is the way it's done. But it really doesn't make sense that the seller's paying the agent to negotiate against them to take more money out of their pocket. It kind of doesn't. So that's what these lawsuits are saying. And you got big money behind them. Zillow's kind of involved in some of this stuff. So there's a lot of big money and a lot of big industry behind pushing these forward. And it looks like they're going to have pretty big implications to the market. Now, they're not going to come out and say buyer agency is illegal. I mean, that doesn't make sense. But what they're very likely to do is to come out and say it is no longer encouraged or no longer a requirement for the seller to offer. The seller can do whatever they want to do. They can't be, I doubt they're going to be prohibited from doing it. And it's not going to be an instantaneous change in the market where all of a sudden nobody's doing it. But there's a difference between, because it used to be in Bright MLS, it was $1 requirement. That's our MLS, second largest in the country. It used to be $1 requirement. So to be in the MLS, you had to offer at least $1 compensation to the buyer broker. Now it's $0. Is there a big difference in $1? No, we just talked about pennies don't matter, right? But there's a difference when it's the talk in the community and the agents. There's a big difference when it's now going to be, did you sell a house within the last 6 months? You're due compensation, join the class action. And now that's what's being talked about. Now the sellers, you're going to go into a listing appointment, the seller saying, I'm not paying the buyer broker. And they're going to be knowledgeable and informed and sort of given that. And then that's when you're going to start seeing it.
Let me, Joe, let me throw in a wrench to this whole conversation, man. So I live in Fort Bragg, Fort Liberty now, sorry.
North Carolina, right?
Yeah, North Carolina. And a lot of the buyers, I'd say overwhelming majority, maybe 90% are VA. VA has a requirement that a buyer cannot pay a buyer agent commission. Yep. So you create this whole wackadoo situation where, well, now, you're not receiving it from the seller and you're prohibited by law from receiving it from the buyer. So now VA buyers are just, kind of stuck in the middle being like, what's going on? So, it's a really weird situation when you throw that wrench into the works. I don't know how much VA loans you're working with in the.
Oh, we're right by Fort Meade, so.
Yeah, there you go. So, I mean, it's just really odd dynamic.
Yeah. Well, and there'll have to be changes in it, but the real problem is who this is going to wind up punishing. If it goes through the way we think it might, is going to be the typical first-time home buyer they're the ones that need the most hand-holding, the ones that have never done it, the lower budget, the struggling buyers that are just saving enough to get in. They're not going to be able to afford to pay their agent. And
let's not forget, VA buyers are trying to put in 0%. Like back in the day, you could buy a house here, 0% down. You put like a due diligence amount or earnest money, you'd be walking away with a check. In this market. Like buyers were being paid to purchase homes with VA loans.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. The market's always changing.
Yeah. So it's not going to be an instant change, but I do see it starting to work that way, which is then going to require agents to think about things in a totally different manner. But the other thing that nobody's talking about with that, so we talk about how it affects real estate, but if you're a lender, you're a title company, you're an insurance agent, you're a home inspector, you're in any of the services that touch this industry, where do you get your referrals from? The buyer agent. If there's less buyer's agents, are you prepared to market to the public? I don't know. Are you prepared to compete with Quicken, with Wells Fargo, with Bank of America, the big banks that market to the public? Probably not, because you market to agents. So it's the paradigm shift in the whole way that this could go down over the next couple of years. I think it's 5 years before it really takes hold, but I think there's a lot of shifting and changing that's coming to this industry. But that's also opportunity. If you think big and you think smart and you see opportunities and you problem solve, there's opportunity there.
Right for disruption, Joe. I'm excited to see what you put together. So it's there's some opportunity here, and it's good to be thinking in advance about where you can add value to your clients in this manner. I mean, it's there's going to be opportunity there for sure.
And that's what it all comes down to. It's the value to the client. The client, if you give the client the best service, it's always going to win in the end.
Agreed. And with that being said, you have to remember that as investors, our tenants are our clients. So it's doing the same exact thing to the people that you're responsible for. You know, whether you're an agent, whether you're an investor, whether you're an Airbnb guy, whatever, you got to remember that these people are not just a number, they're a client that, you know, spends regularly in your business, quote unquote, and you got to treat them the best. So I'm excited for the changes that are happening for the whirlwind. We do a meetup every week or once a month. Last night, the topic of discussion was interest rates. Some people were saying they like them where they're at right now because it's keeping a lot of people out of the market. So when opportunities do come, it gives them less competition. Other people are like, hey, I can't afford to buy anything. None of the numbers work. So you've got this thing from the older guys and the younger people. So there's a whole lot of things going on right now that I think if you do what we talked about and have all your ducks in a row and are looking for those opportunities, when it comes, you'll be ready to strike. And you got to remember that it's okay to not be buying anything as well. Like it's okay if it takes 6 months, if it takes a year, if it takes 18 months for you to stumble across or be prepared when the right thing comes to snatch it up. That's okay. I don't want anyone out there to feel like if you're feeling pressure from yourself to find something and buy something, just remember that it's okay. Sometimes not doing a deal is the best deal that you could have done. So let's all just get some perspective right now and, remember that. So with that being said, I think this is a perfect time for us to get into the next segment of the show that we call the Big Four. James, take it away.
All right, Joe. Tell our listeners something that you do that is a financial independence cheat code, something that, really helps propel your finances forward.
Well, it's due diligence, or it's consistency in what I do. It's making sure that I do the right things every day in my business to make sure that income keeps coming in. And if income's coming in, everything's good, right? It's when income stops coming in that big problems arise. So it's making sure that I do the daily things that need to happen in order to make sure that I'm successful.
Love it.
I think that's fantastic. Get up every day, do the things that you need to do. And that's just the beginning to set yourself up. So love that cheat code. All right, this one, number 2, we call resources. So are there any particular books, podcasts, or people that have really shaped your financial mindset, your business mindset, your investing mindset that maybe our listeners haven't heard before that you think they might benefit from?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to say this podcast right here is a wonderful one, right? Different opinions, different mindsets for sure. I've already plugged my podcast. I'm going to plug it again. Bird Seeds. You get on wherever you listen to this. My other podcast is called The Sales Perch. So again, last name's Bird. You got to use Bird in all your marketing. So The Sales Perch is they're both these are short form podcasts. And actually, Patrick's been a guest on Birdseed, so hope you guys have listened to that already. If not, go listen to that episode. It's great. Talks about how he went from an idea to owning how many doors now? 35 doors?
35.
There you go. So Sales Perch is short form talking about different sales skills and techniques and styles. So encourage you to listen to those. As far as books, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck was one of my favorite books that I've read. Just really, I think, empowering and really good at kind of opening your mind and caring a little bit less in what other people think and caring more about really getting in tune with what you want and what you think.
That is a great book. I highly recommend reading it on vacation because then everyone's like looking at what you're reading, like, oh, what's that about? Kind of get things started. So
the other one I'm going to say is Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. Fantastic.
Another great book. I have that on the shelf behind me as well. Great Minds Think Alike. 2 great books. And I listen to Joe's podcast every week. They're great. And they are like little 5-10 minuters, just to get you in that mindset that you need every day to accomplish your goals. So with that, James, number 3, sir.
All right, Joe, future you, man. Where's your business and where's your personal life? Like, paint that picture of where you're at in 5 years.
That's awesome. So I'm all about freedom. I'm all about not being told what to do. I'm a punk rocker at heart. Grew up as a punk rock dude. Tell me what to do, and I'm going to do it the exact opposite way. You've already seen that I don't run my investment business the way the gurus say to run it because I don't like being told what to do. So the way I want to see my life in 5 years is absolute freedom, that I can do what I want to do, when I want to do it, how I want to do it. So obviously, continuing with the family life, watching the kids grow in their sports and all that, running my entrepreneurial side of my businesses the way that I want to run them, and continuing to grow and make people's lives better, and impacting the community and society and earth in a positive way, not a negative way.
Love it. All great aspirations, Joe. It's great.
Awesome.
Very great. Very great. All right. Our last one is for everyone out there that feels a little bit more motivated, a lot bit more inspired, and for sure more educated on the way that they can run their business. Where's the best place for them to reach out, to follow along on your journey, and get in contact with you?
Yeah, so my Instagram is probably my best. My handle is totally boring. People like to make fun of me for it, but I think it's awesome and direct. It's Joseph_S_Bird_realtor. So again, Joseph_S_Bird_realtor. And you can follow. I post a lot of personal content. Like right now, I just posted a bunch of photos and videos of my wife and I going to Nashville, doing the honky tonks, and then going to the caverns and seeing music in a cave. So you get a lot of my personal, but then you get all my podcaster broadcast on there as well, clips and links, real estate business, all that kind of stuff. But certainly Facebook or wherever else you're on social media, I am sure I have a profile.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, guys, you guys know the drill. If you like this podcast, if you hate this podcast, do us a favor, leave us a review, positive reviews only. You can send us a DM and tell us how much you hate the podcast and our guest. We appreciate that. With that, like this video, share this with somebody. If this episode touched a chord with you, please share it with somebody else. We're trying to increase the listeners. We're trying to continue to bring you guys amazing guests like Joe and all the other guests that we've had on the podcast each and every week. And with that, we'll see you guys next time. Peace.
See you guys.